Hey everyone, welcome back. Remember my video I made a few weeks ago on the Chroma Zada's Whisper and Cold Ward helmet setup that let you instantly delete anything in the game? Even sentience? Although it's now known that your setup for the new war was mostly relevant, it still was an extremely strong setup that can deal with anything, even endurance setups on Steel Path. The only issue? It forced you to use Chroma, and in theory it is possible for Demolist to not work properly with it if you don't armor strip, though nothing was stopping you from just bringing a Vastalok since the melee slot was free. But what if you wanted to play a different frame? Well, that's what we're doing today. I'm bringing you a completely new way to play Mesa. It has the same restrictions as the Chroma video though. It must be a hit scan weapon. Differently, it also doesn't make all weapons broken. It works better on some than others, which we'll get into later. It also has more impacts on pistols than primaries because its purpose is to make every weapon viable. And primaries already have 100 munitions. But wait, isn't this basically just Garuda but worse? Well, yes, but no. See, Garuda requires you to cast your 4 every time you want to get the AoE slash, and it's radial around you instead of sticking to you like a buff. Also, Mesa has much better survivability than Garuda for less investment in relevant levels of Steel Path. Shatter Shield gives you 95% damage reduction, and her shooting gallery augment, Muzzle Flash, has frequent radial blinds that bypass obstacles and don't require line of sight. There's just one thing I want to clear up before we start though. This does not work on our Peacemakers. They use some unique hit scan mechanics and thus do not work with what I will show in this video. As a preface, I want to mention this build is not meant to accomplish the same thing as the Chroma build. It is not a nuke build and is much more limited in scope. Today's video goes and explores the mechanics and potential of this synergy. If you're only looking for the highest KPS options, those are found towards the end of the video. The prior sections will have a mixture of other weapons that perform decently with this. Hopefully, this video will help you figure out other better weapon options as I cannot test them all myself. So what exactly does this build let you do? Its main purpose is to bring certain lesser played weapons back into the light of day, being good enough to compete with more meta options. They won't outpace AoE setups though, because nothing can really do that. But it will massively bring up the power level of any eligible weapon. Shatter Shield has an augment called Staggering Shield. This augment causes all reflected damage instances to have a 50% chance of inflicting an impact proc. Recall that the Cold Elemental Ward buffs all reflected damage by a multiplier, commonly around 10x at or above 300 strength on a Chroma build. Recall all damage shot into Zada's Whisper bubble is treated as reflected damage, and that Zada also double dips these kind of buffs with a second damage instance. This means the initial shot on Chroma got a 10 times ward multiplier, and then the Zada hit had a 100 times ward multiplier. Staggering Shield has no damage multiplier, but it works the same way. The main hit will have 50% chance of proccing impact because it is treated as redirected damage, and the Zada hit will also have a 50% chance of proccing impact again as well. Interestingly, Mesa's Stagger Shield damage preserves the weapon's original properties and also inherits the effects of weapon mods. Most importantly, this includes the mods Internal Bleeding and Hemorrhage, which can force slash procs from impact procs. Recall I said this is super important for pistols. This is because any primary weapon can force slash from crits with 100 munitions, but pistols don't have a mod like this. It also means you don't have to worry about slash weight anymore and can build full viral since our slash will come from force procs. Doubtful of the power of a Zada Mesa setup? Still think it's only used for Peacemaker's DPS? The damage increase of a weapon using a slash Stagger Shield build is roughly 10 times stronger than a non-Stagger Shield build. That's way higher than Eclipse and doesn't depend on lighting, and infinitely higher than Roar or any other kind of damage buff. You may not see the numbers immediately because a 10 times damage increase comes from 10 times more slash procs. You see this Brakk, full magazine dump, and we barely get to 10 slash procs. I tried again with Zada and Shatter Shield, and now we have over 100. How about this Euphona? Same thing. Basically, it turns any eligible weapon into a massive slash machine. And the best part of this setup is it can still be used with the Peacemaker Mesa since her pistols already work well with Zada's Whisper. But a few things will change on her build, so let's take a closer look. There are quite a few things going on here, so listen carefully. The first thing is you don't really need to build for strength on this Mesa. However, there is a minimum logical requirement. Running lower strength like this also changes your Peacemaker builds, which we will go over later. Why 94 strength with a rank 4 overextended? This only works if you're using growing power. When growing power is active, you have 119 strength, which is just barely enough to reach 95% damage reduction on your Shatter shield. Strength doesn't affect the impact proc chance of the staggering shield augment. We have chosen to actually build for some range on this build because we're also slotting the muzzle flash augment. For a build not as focused on our exalted pistols, this is one of the best augments in the game. It is a radial, non-line of sight blind that sticks to you like a buff. Every 6 kill assists by a player with shooting gallery, your next shot will cause this radial blind. Actual kills by you count towards these assists. Also, Mesa herself always has her version of the shooting gallery buff that doesn't rotate through teammates, so you're always able to activate the blind regardless of solo or squad. However, if you're in squad, your teammates can trigger the augment also. The only requirement is to actually get kills, which won't be a problem on the setup. It has a base range of 12 meters radius, which is why we built for 175 range, and extends it to a 21 meter radius. If you kill enemies fast, you basically keep enemies near permanently blinded. Prime continuity for 155 duration on this Mesa keeps them blinded for 9.3 seconds, and because duration also affects how long the ability itself lasts, you only have to cast this once every 46 seconds. Your Shatter shield will also last a spicy 39 seconds, and your Zatas will last 54. While the 100 efficiency can still be slightly expensive, especially if you do choose to use your 4, we have paired Prime Flow with Energize to bank up energy, and even Equilibrium to push it further. If you don't think you're going to use your Peacemakers at all, you can actually drop Prime Flow for Augur Secrets. This will let you drop Growing Power for Combat Discipline, and Arcane Energize for Arcane Avenger. You can use a max ranked Combat Discipline to save Forma because the 10 self damage per kill will be reduced by Shatter Shield to just 1 damage. We still have Rolling Guard for iframes if needed, and I would strongly recommend bringing a Sentinel with a burst laser weapon to carry 2 Augur mods for the set bonus stat stick if you're DPSing with a pistol on this Mesa. The Zatas Whisper on this build doesn't have much strength scaling, but the bonus damage really doesn't scale fast, so it doesn't matter if you have 300 strength or 100. That's the difference between 75% extra damage or 25% extra damage on the Zata damage instance. The Arcane Velocity is obviously here for pistol setups, which we will look at today, but you may be wondering why this is rank 2. Now, this doesn't apply to all pistols, but the first one we will look at only wants a rank 2 to reach a specific fire rate. Can you guess which one it is? Ding ding, time's up. It's Euphona Prime. This pistol has base 1.5 fire rate, a rank 2 velocity at 60% fire rate, pushing the weapon up to 2.4. This is just below the 2.5 fire rate requirement of Hemorrhage, which allows us to keep the double effect on the mod. Each impact proc we create with Euphona will have a 70% chance to convert into slash, instead of 35%. This is a huge boon to Euphona, which is historically a raw damage weapon due to the main shot being massively puncture weighted and being crit viable, and the alt fire being slash weighted, but having subpar status and non-existent crit chance. This is also where Arcane Avenger comes in and makes it worth building for crit damage. This 2% crit chance becomes 47 because Avenger adds flat crit. Therefore, we now have a hybrid viable slash pistol on something that both wasn't slash or crit viable on the buckshot previously. Why buckshot? Because that's the hit scan component of the weapon, which is what we need for this setup. The main shot is projectile and won't work with Zatas Whisper this way. Another factoid you may not know is Zatas Whisper Void proc bubbles reset fall off. You see how Euphona has 6 meter fall off start on this build? The buckshot resets that to 0 meters traveled when it enters the void bubble, meaning all shots that enter the bubble will have no fall off whatsoever. We can also build full viral on this pistol now, since our slash procs don't care about IPS weight or status chance on the weapon. This massively improves our potential because we now straight up have 70% chance of proccing slash from impact instead of 27% here split across all damage weights, and we even reliably proc viral to boost the bleeds. The void procs create massive bubbles and also make up for the massive spread on the weapon. If you shoot ahead and proc void, all shots into the bubble afterwards will redirect to the head as well. Our arcane is merciless since we're killing with slash, and Deadhead can't proc this way. It also helps with the reload on the weapon since the magazine is small. In fact, the build even has a free slot since we didn't slot critical chance on the weapon, which I will now dedicate to primed quick draw to cut down the reload just to 0.9 seconds. The Bane double dips our bleeds to 2.4 times more damage, and us having galvanized multi-shot lets us shoot up to 33 pellets per buckshot, which will near instantly max viral after 2 shots, as well as the Zada's instance, which will duplicate another 33 pellets. Because you need to shoot once a proc void anyways, and then a second shot to get everything to bleed into the enemy, it just flows together naturally. Galvanized shot does not work properly on the main shot because it is projectile like I said. This build will proc slash, viral, impact, and void reliably, which means 480% bonus base damage and is over twice as strong as Hornet Strike, while also giving another 80% status chance. The Exilus can be whatever you want. I would recommend eject magazine, reflex draw, or a pistol ammo mutation. Now remember, this is not intended to be a nuke setup. You will not clear tiles with this, but it does breathe life back into older weapons. Not all weapons I show today will use a similar playstyle to Euphona. It's just the first one I picked due to the funky arcane velocity requirement and the near forgotten legacy that Euphona once held as one of the strongest pistols in the game. In fact, this one is arguably the worst one of the bunch, besides one exception later onwards, but it only gets better from here. Let's test it out. Level 160 Dracarmatic Bombards. Wait, bombards? Yes, because the raw damage on the setup once stacked is so high, I can't test it against corrupted heavy gunners. We want to see those slash bleed numbers, so they need to live the first 2 shots. Simply put, you need Zada and Shatter shield up for this to work. Shooting gallery is a bonus that will help in missions, but not here because I don't need the blind and simulacrum testing. Once I have my arcane stacked up, you'll notice I'm bleeding for roughly 250 to 500,000. If I proc Avenger, they usually don't survive the main shot anymore. I do roughly 2.5 times more damage on the setup when it's active, meaning the bleeds are roughly 600,000 to 1.2 million. It's very difficult to showcase, but I did get one in here. Now, what do you think would happen if there was a teammate with Cold Elemental Ward on the team built for range? That's a double dip for 100 times damage. You'd probably get over 100 million bleeds. Anyways, this should give you a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with, so let's move on to the next weapon. This is a popular one, Pyrana Prime. This weapon is actually crit viable, so you don't need Arcane Avenger. This is the Mesa build I'm using for it. The fire rate is already so high, you won't get double bonus from Hemorrhage anyway, so we're going max velocity. If you want even more fun in games, you can take Combo Theory on a Glaive Prime. This will massively buff the reload on your pistol and another 100% magazine capacity. It works for all pistols. Most people probably came by this mod and used it for Pyrana during Plaguestar, so I felt it appropriate to introduce here. You could also have used it with Euphona as well as every single other pistol I showed today. So that Pyrana build, it's basically identical to the Euphona build, except this time we don't get double effect from Hemorrhage because the fire rate is too high. It's only 35% chance of impact to slash, however once again our IPS weight becomes irrelevant, so it is still insanely massively better than the 10.8% status implied here because our viral weight is also too high. But now we can build for full viral too. And because the pistol is natively crit viable, that spare slot for reload last time is now instead filled with Creeping Bullseye. The fire rate penalty is easily negated by max ranked arcane velocity like I mentioned. The Exilus slot I would recommend ammo mutation because Pyrana is ammo hungry. And Merciless is always on a slash setup. Combo Theory would actually cut this reload down to 0.7 seconds, which is why I recommend it so much. For a full explanation on what's going on this build, refer to the Euphona Prime build analysis section. Test time? Handles amazingly well. You basically just spam shots until stuff starts dying and you build up stacks. Then literally single shots will be enough to kill enemies. One shot to proc void, one shot to bleed them out. The bleeds aren't as high as Euphona, but you can shoot Pyrana much faster, reload faster, larger magazine, everything just handles better. You still get 150 to 300,000 bleeds, and it's even full auto. There's even Pyrana's Prime passive that gives you twice the magazine size, and even faster fire rate. Stack this with Combo Theory and you can get an instant reload Pyrana with 48 magazine size. It's hilarious and incredibly satisfying to shoot. Now what's next on our list? Akbronco Prime. This one is a special one, and is the one that I mentioned is weaker on the list, but it is very interesting. So Akbronco has never had problems proccing status, but it has always had problems with damage. It has a high fire rate, but the magazine size is only decent. It's still way better than the single Bronco and non-prime variants, which only have 2 or 4 magazine. Remember, Combo Fury will make this weapon have 16 magazine. The reload has a base value of 2.3 seconds, and Merciless combined with Prime Quick Draw cuts this down to a spicy 1 second. This is because we can get viral with just a single mod, Damzab Vadi, the weapon augment that came with Deimos last year. It gives 240% viral, a massive amount of elemental weight, and ensures we proc mostly viral even though the mod doesn't give status chance, like as if we use 2 mod slots for the 60/60 mods. Galvanized Shot still manages to give us some status, and once again with Impact, Viral, Slash, and Void for 480% base damage scaling. Basically, every single build I show you today is going to proc at least these 4 elements, so every build will get at least 480% base damage from Galvanized Shot. The X-List, I would again recommend an ammo mutation because this weapon isn't very ammo efficient. The weapon has horrible crit chance, so we're only modding crit damage on the weapon, and the free slot is taken up by Lethal Torrent. The Mesa will be running the Arcane Avenger setup this time, and with this, we solved the only problem Akbronco ever had: scaling damage through Slash. While probably the weakest link in this video, the reason why I included Akbronco is because it really has been forgotten in the past. It's mostly only used as a primer or star chart killing, but this actually makes it viable on Steel Path again as a proper DPS tool. The rest of the weapons on this list I would say are quite better than this, so don't worry about it. But I do hope that this brings a little bit of joy back to the Akbronco enthusiasts. Next up, Kuva Brakk. After Euphona, this is probably one of the strongest hitting weapons I'm showcasing today. The weapon is already crit viable, so we don't need Arcane Avenger. Now for this weapon, you'd probably want to take Toxin on the setup. It's a bit different from your traditional heat Brakk you would normally take for a viral heat build. So this means you could remove Pistol Pestilence, which I would personally replace for Sharpened Bullets. While this does drop your viral weight, it's mostly fine because of the sheer amount of pellets you already shoot out, and Brakk having a decent amount of status already. Why Creeping Bullseye instead of Prime Pistol Gambit? Normally, the extra crit isn't worth a fire rate penalty on pistols, but Brakk already reaches a 10.0 fire rate soft cap on semi-auto weapons with Arcane Velocity regardless of which mod you use. Prime Bane for the double dip on Bleeds for 2.4 times more damage, and the reload is just 0.8 seconds with Merciless, which is lightning quick. Merciless instead of Deadhead since we're killing with Slash. Galvanized Shot again scales off 4 statuses on this build: Impact, Slash, Viral, and Void. Because I'm using Heat Brakk, it will probably also proc Heat for a 5th status, totaling 600% base damage scaling, or nearly 3 times as strong as Hornet Strike. I would once again recommend Ammo Mutation since Brakk chews it up very quickly. Like Euphona, the Void Bubble helps to pull the massive spread of your Brakk shots all towards the head of the enemy. This weapon is basically what Akbronco Prime aspires to be. It handles like a mix between Pyrana and Euphona. It hits like a truck, similar to Euphona, giving 250 to 500,000 bleeds, which is much higher than Pyrana. However, it is semi-auto instead of full auto, but it does reach the soft cap 10.0 fire rate with just Arcane Velocity like I said, so it handles well. If I was on Sharpened Bullets on a Toxin Brakk, I imagine the bleeds would be 350 to 700,000 instead, as Pistol Pestilence currently doesn't help boost bleed proc damage besides just more viral procs, but we already cap out at 10 stacks easily. The next interesting pistol on this list is Magnus Prime, a newer one. There's one thing you should know about this weapon. When you land a shot, the weapon has a chance to gain 100% ammo efficiency for a few seconds. This is similar to Arcane Pistolier, but the Arcane requires headshot kills, which we can't get with a Slash Magnus. The Arcane also cannot be refreshed while it is already active. However, Magnus' Prime's passive can be. So technically, you end up with infinite ammo and never have to reload, though it asks for nothing else special on the build. It's the exact same build as the Brakk. If you want to run the Deadly Maneuvers augment for whatever reasons, such as Disruption, I would recommend dropping Galvanized Shots for it. Galvanized Shot generally will give you between 480 to 840% base damage increase with a primer. The Merciless Arcane already gives you 360% and the weapon innately has 100% base damage already. So Galvanized Shot acts as a 2 times or 3 times final multiplier here, but Deadly Maneuvers gives 400% extra crit chance to headshot over the next 2 shots. But this is not normal crit chance, it is a final multiplicative buff. 400% final multiplier means 5 times more total crit. This 84%, it becomes 420, haha, nice, percent crit, or tier 2 red crits. This means your crits will do 20.6 times more damage than a non-crit, or 25.5 times if you land a tier 3 red crit since you're actually above 400% crit chance. Yellow crits currently only do 5.9 times more damage than non-crits. So if you use this augment, it is roughly a 4 times total damage increase, which is much more than what Galvanized Shot can provide. Merciless because slash DPS can't proc Deadhead, and if you need reload, it does help cut it down to just 0.9 seconds. The weapon does work pretty well, even though it doesn't have the massive pellet count of the earlier weapons to max proc viral instantly. Sizable base damage and the potential for infinite ammo really helps out in dishing out DPS consistently. The only drawback is that clickety click click, but it does come together pretty well here to take enemies out. All it requires to trigger the passive is a hit, not even a headshot. So even if you whiff that headshot for Zada's Whisper to proc, you'll still be able to get that infinite ammo. And once you get that void bubble, you don't even have to aim, so it's super easy to keep refreshing the ammo efficiency. 150 to 300,000 bleeds, but you never have to reload. An interesting spin as a Brakk variant on the playstyle for weapon handling and build. Even without pellets, you can still kill with just 2 shots reliably. Want another interesting choice? How about Gaze? Never thought you would see a slash Gaze, would you? There isn't really anything special about the Gaze, besides the fact that it can chain. So we have our same stock build here again with no spare slots. The 2 crit mods, you can use Prime Pistol Gambit here if you want. I was just having polarity problems. Prime Pistol Gambit is better on Gaze than creeping. But yeah, and Prime Target Cracker. The Prime Bane for 2.4 times more damage on bleeds, 2 60/60 mods to make viral, the obvious Hemorrhage mod itself to create those slash dots, and our 2 galvanized mods for multi-shot and base damage. Being a beam, meaning Gaze will max out viral stacks near instantly, since it ticks twice per second and has a 51% status chance on this build. I don't really know what you would pick for the Kit Gun Arcane slot. Charge is actually not good for this. We can't proc Bolt or Seeker since we're killing with Slash, and Sora's near useless on the setup. I guess you could use Residual Shock if you want to see the memes, but really nothing will be useful here. Take Seeker if you want hopes of something usable, but it really won't make a difference. The weapon Arcane is obviously going to be Merciless again because Slash DPS. This also cuts the reload down to 1.3 seconds, which is manageable. As a beam, you're going to be able to proc all 3 elements on the weapon, Puncture, Radiation, and Viral, but you'll also proc Impact, Slash, and Void. Basically, this Mesa setup always independently procs 3 extra elements onto whatever the weapon already has, and beams proc insanely fast, so even low-weighted elements will proc. 6 elements means Galvanized Shot will give us 720% base damage skilling, which is probably the highest of all weapons shown so far without resulting to a rifle or melee primer. How does it work in practice? Pretty well, honestly. It takes a moment to build the galvanized stacks up, but once you do, it works exactly like you would expect. No matter what you aim the Gaze at, it will die within a second or 2, and also everything else around it. It's extremely satisfying to use, and there's always more potential in team setups. Like I said, all you're missing is a friend with a range build for Cold Ward. And if they're running the everlasting ward augments, oh boy, just keep in mind that the Chroma Zada ward strat doesn't work as client and requires you to be host. So there's a solid chance that this Mesa Zada Shatter strat won't work as client either. But well, now you have a whole bunch of weapons that are more than viable again. Maybe you'll be able to come up with something that works even better than I showed here today. Any kit scan primary would work also, but I chose to keep the emphasis on pistols today because Hunter Munitions doesn't exist for pistols. Besides that, remember that having fun is the most important part of Warframe and is what keeps us around. Also, because I did say I was going to show you a Peacemaker build to work with this Mesa setup, here you go. This is what you would use on a lower strength Mesa build. There are a couple of other weapons that I didn't showcase today for various reasons that I would strongly recommend trying out, or at least in the future. Twin Rogga is the first one. I just don't own it. It's basically a 2-shot Euphona buckshot, but it has even higher base damage. Although a tiny magazine. I imagine it could shred pretty well, but you definitely want a ton of reload stuff for it. The next one is Knell Prime. Unfortunately, Knell currently has a bug on it when you go to Operator. It keeps storing Knell's passive stacks every time you go in, and the first stack can never be removed. Unfortunately, Knell's passive also gives it 100% ammo efficiency, and stacking ammo efficiency completely breaks the weapon to the point it no longer has ammo efficiency. So Knell and its Prime are unusable right now if you use Operator in your gameplay. This bug is actually applying to all weapons with stacks. So Arca Cisco, Arca Titron, etc. Basically for most weapons this is a massive bug buff, but specifically for Knell, it sucks because it breaks the ammo efficiency stat. But once fixed, 40% crit chance and infinite ammo, full auto, and the passive also adds up to flat 60% status and a flat 1.5 times extra crit multiplier. you'll be spitting out viral stacks everywhere, and insane slash crits for bleeds. The final one I would also recommend is Kuva Quartakk, which is not a shotgun, but a rifle, which means it can equip internal bleeding. It may not be obvious, but this is a burst fire weapon. This was changed after its release to get around shotgun status math before the status chance rework last year. I don't own this weapon, but I imagine it will shred probably 150 to 300,000 bleeds per burst shot. And the magazine size? 88. You're not going to run out of shots anytime soon. Feel free to try these ones out. They would use builds similar to the ones I showed today. 2 slots for viral, the crit mods, Hemorrhage, Bane, the galvanized CO, and maybe another utility mod here if there's an open slot. For the best weapons of the bunch today, you've probably noticed that there is a big issue here, because we're relying on slash procs, which delay DPS by 1 second, and void bubbles are huge bullet attractor orbs. We're essentially relegating our weapons to single target DPS. While these options shown today work amazing for, say, Steel Path Exterminate or Mobile Defense, etc., they are not particularly KPS efficient. So far, we have focused on DPS. This means if we ever got a survival mode that didn't depend on KPS, it would be good, such as Disruption. These builds work really well there for the trash mobs, except they can't kill the Demless well because demos resist bleeds, and the damage scaling isn't strong enough on these builds to overcome that. But there are 2 builds today that actually have decent KPS with this. Those 2 are Athodai's Alt-Fire and Ignis Wraith. This is because these are the only 2 hit-scan weapons in the game with infinite punch-through that also have a predefined cone or hitbox area. Zenith also has infinite punch-through, but the void bubble can launch the shot away and prevent you from hitting enemies further down the line. We've already broken down a ton of what's going on with the synergies today, so I will just drop you the builds and quick showcases of these weapons. Just keep in mind, Athodai really wants ammo mutation to keep it up, even more so than Ignis. Ignis has a fall-off area at the end of its cone, so Sinister Reach helps extend it further, while also enabling you to hit many more enemies. It extends the range of the beam from 20 meters to approximately 32. One last thing to keep in mind is these builds increase Ignis Wraith's damage by 2.28 times and actually lets Athodai slash to scale. It isn't the 5 to 10 times more damage the weapons from earlier have, but these 2 are still able to maintain crowd KPS with their hitboxes. It also does cost a helmet slot, but we got 2.28 times more damage on Ignis with just 94 strength, and scaling slash damage on Athodai with that same strength. Eclipse requires 152 strength to get 2.28 times more damage at maximum length. Realistically, you wouldn't reach this until you're at or above 200 strength, and it doesn't give slash to Athodai. And that would also take away from the duration and range for CC utility on our Mesa for her muzzle flash. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'll try my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible. Like I've done with covering all this new war stuff. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm going to continue dropping tons more new war content in the future. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.